The persistent high-pitched whine of an orbital sander was Ethan Thorne's morning serenade, a familiar counterpoint to the distant clang of a dockside crane. His workshop, a cavernous space carved out of a repurposed fishing gear, shed smelled perpetually of sawdust tung oil and a faint underlying saltiness from the nearby ocean. Light thick with motes of suspended wood dust slanted through grimy windows, illuminating the organized chaos within stacks of rough-hewn timber, an array of meticulously arranged hand tools gleaming on pegboards, and the elegant skeletal forms of custom furniture taking shape under his skilled hands. This was Ethan's world, a modest but self-contained universe where the rhythm of creation dictated the passage of time. His life was a quiet ballet of meticulous craftsmanship and the relentless, joyous rhythm of caring for his precocious 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Every morning before the town fully stirred, Ethan would already be up, a silent sentinel in the pre-dawn gloom. He'd brew strong black coffee in an old percolator, its gurgling a comforting sound. Then, with practiced ease, he'd prepare Lily's breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, sometimes pancakes on a special day, arranged artfully on a chipped ceramic plate. Their meals were shared at a small, sturdy table in the corner of the workshop, amidst the scent of freshly cut wood, a testament to his own handiwork. He'd listen with a quiet intensity as Lily recounted her dreams, her plans for the day at school, or her latest discoveries from a dog-eared book. He was perpetually tuned into her needs, her moods, her boundless curiosity. Lily's presence was the anchor that kept Ethan tethered to this quiet, unassuming life. He'd meticulously check her homework, his brow furrowed in concentration, even as he effortlessly explained complex fractions or the intricacies of ancient history. The bed she slept in, the small desk, she did her drawings on the sturdy bookshelf filled with her growing collection of fantasy novels. All had been crafted by his own hands, imbued with his silent love and tireless dedication. Their evenings were marked by the soft glow of a reading lamp, Lily curled up with a book, and Ethan sketching late into the night, the graphite whispers of his pencil on paper filling the space. His financial struggles were a persistent dull ache beneath the surface of his calm demeanor. They manifested in small, almost imperceptible ways. The patched-up elbows of his work shirts mended with thread precisely matched to the fabric. The careful rationing of materials, every scrap of wood, every offcut saved and repurposed. The way his mind was constantly performing complex mental calculus, weighing the cost of a new saw blade against a fresh box of Lily's favorite art supplies. He never complained, never spoke of the burden. It was simply the reality of his existence, a challenge he met with quiet resilience. When Lily finally drifted off to sleep, her breathing even and soft, a profound quiet would settle over the apartment. This was often the loneliest part of Ethan's day. The silence punctuated only by the hum of the old refrigerator and the occasional creak of the aging building would amplify the solitude. He'd sit at his drafting table, the aroma of sawdust his only companion, and sketch. Not just current projects, but the ambitious, almost impossible dreams that flickered in his mind. A revolutionary new boat hull, design an automated furniture assembly system, a gravity-defying sculpture that defied conventional physics. These sketches, detailed and intricate, hinted at a mind that saw the world in a fundamentally different way. Interspersed with these mundane details, there were subtle, fleeting glimpses of Ethan's extraordinary intellect and an unconventional past he rarely, if ever, acknowledged. Sometimes, while waiting for a pot of glue to set, he'd absent-mindedly pick up a scrap of plywood and, with a piece of charcoal, solve a complex differential equation, the elegant curves of the mathematical symbols stark against the raw wood grain. He possessed an uncanny ability to visualize intricate mechanical systems in 3 dimensions, rotating them in his mind, stripping away layers, seeing solutions where others saw only impenetrable problems. He could diagnose a failing engine by the cadence of its cough, or predict structural weaknesses by simply running his hand along a beam. These were not the skills of a mere carpenter. They were the hallmarks of a brilliant, perhaps even prodigious engineer. A peculiar faded tattoo adorned his left wrist, partially hidden by the long sleeves he almost always wore even on warmer days. It was a stylized gear, its teeth interlocking seamlessly with the lines of a compass. The ink was faded, almost washed out, as if time and deliberate neglect had tried to erase it. It was a subtle nod to a brilliant but troubled past, a period of his life he had retreated from, a world of high-stakes design and complex machinery he had consciously abandoned for the quiet anonymity of sawdust and honest craftsmanship. He had built this life for Lily, a sanctuary from the scrutiny and expectations of a world he no longer wished to inhabit. One crisp morning, as the fog still clung to the harbor, muffling the usual dockside clamor, Ethan was on his way to pick up a delivery of rare hardwood. He decided to walk along the water's edge, a small detour that afforded him a moment of quiet contemplation before the day's demands began. The air was cool, carrying the sharp scent of brine and diesel. As he rounded a bend near the derelict section of the old fishing docks, he heard it, a faint, distressed whimpering almost swallowed by the lapping waves. He paused his trained ears, picking up the sound again. It was coming from beneath a discarded pile of netting and weathered buoys. He knelt, pushing aside the brittle, sun-bleached fibers, and found a dog. It was a scruffy terrier mix matted with mud and seaweed, its leg hopelessly tangled in a discarded fishing net, whimpering in pain. Its eyes wide with fear pleaded silently. Despite his tight schedule and meager resources, Ethan didn't hesitate. His inherent compassion, a deep-seated part of his nature, immediately took over. He knew he was already late for his delivery, and every minute translated into lost income. But the dog's plight superseded everything. He spent what felt like an eternity patiently, meticulously untangling the tough, knotted fibers of the net. He worked slowly, gently, talking to the terrified animal in low, soothing tones, his large, calloused hands surprisingly delicate. He freed the leg, which was bleeding and swollen, then pulled out his worn multi-tool, extracted a small first aid kit from his backpack, always prepared, even for the unexpected, and carefully cleaned the wound, wrapping it in a makeshift bandage. The dog, exhausted but no longer whimpering, licked his hand tentatively. Ethan looked at its soulful eyes, then at his watch. He sighed, a sound of profound resignation mixed with quiet determination. He couldn't just leave it. He needed to get it to a vet. He knew of a small, low-cost veterinary clinic on the outskirts of town. It would mean taking a portion of his meager emergency funds money he had earmarked for Lily's new school shoes. But there was no question. He gently scooped up the dog, holding its trembling body close, and began the walk to the vet. The dog, surprisingly calm, rested its head on his shoulder. At the clinic, he explained the situation, paid for the initial examination and medication with a handful of crumpled bills, and received instructions for follow-up care. He returned to his workshop hours later, the dog now named Gears. A quiet nod to his own faded tattoo, and his passion for intricate mechanisms cradled in his arms. He found a soft blanket, made a comfortable bed for Gears in a corner of his workshop, and promised to nurse the dog back to health to find it a good home. This act, small in the grand scheme of things, but profound in its implication, clearly demonstrated Ethan's deep compassion, his unwavering resourcefulness, and his fundamental goodness. It was the kind of selfless act that automatically garnered deep empathy, ensuring that anyone reading his story would unequivocally root for him. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the dust motes dancing in the workshop, Ethan looked at Gears, peacefully asleep. His mind, however, was already back on the blueprints tacked to his wall, the smell of sawdust, and the constant quiet hum of a life he had built with his own two hands, a life that was about to be irrevocably altered by a storm and an unexpected encounter. The storm hit without mercy, a sudden, furious assault on the sleepy coastal town. It was unseasonal, violent, a furious tempest that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the sky. Rain lashed down in horizontal sheets, driven by winds that howled like banshees, rattling the windows of Ethan's workshop and making the old timbers groan in protest. The power flickered, died, then flickered back to life, a tenuous connection to the grid. Lily, tucked snugly into her bed, slept through most of it, but Ethan remained awake. Gears whimpering softly at his feet, his mind tracing the trajectory of the storm, calculating the potential damage to the old docks, the fishing boats, and the fragile infrastructure of their town. He had seen storms before, far worse in places he preferred not to remember, but the raw power of nature always commanded a primal respect. The next morning, the aftermath was stark. Trees lay uprooted, branches scattered like broken bones across the roads. Power lines dangled precariously, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth, bruised foliage, and the sharp tang of salt. The usual morning cacophony of gulls and distant boat horns was replaced by an eerie quiet, punctuated only by the drip of water from eaves and the distant murmur of emergency crews. As Ethan stepped out onto the gravel path leading from his workshop, shielding his eyes against the unexpected glare of the sun on wet surfaces, he saw it. It was a leviathan, a gleaming white behemoth that seemed to mock the humble fishing boats bobbing erratically in the bay. A massive, undeniably opulent yacht named the Siren lay listing severely its starboard side, sunk deeper into the water than it should be. Its advanced radar mast snapped its sleek, futuristic lines, marred by the angry scrawl of rust and grime from the storm's fury. It was utterly defunct, its colossal engines silent, its sophisticated systems dark. It looked like a beached whale out of its element, a symbol of extreme wealth brought low by the indifferent power of the sea. Its sudden, inexplicable failure had already baffled the Coast Guard and a contingent of local mechanics for the past 2 days. Divers had explored its hull. Engineers had poked at its wiring, but no one could pinpoint the core issue. Rumors had spread like wildfire through the town, a lightning strike, a rogue wave, a computer virus. But the truth was more complex and stubbornly elusive. Its presence in their humble bay was a truly shocking sight, drawing curious onlookers like moths to a flame. Just as Ethan was about to turn back inside, contemplating the unexpected quiet of the docks and the unusual sight of the stranded yacht, a black, impeccably polished Rolls-Royce Ghost, utterly out of place on the pockmarked asphalt of the dock road, purred to a silent halt. Its tinted windows, as dark as obsidian, prevented any glimpse of its occupants. The very air around the vehicle seemed to thrum with an invisible aura of power and expense. Then the rear door swung open with a soft sigh of hydraulics, and out stepped Serafina Dubois. She was a vision of stark, formidable elegance. Clad in a tailored charcoal power suit that seemed sculpted to her form, her fiery red hair pulled back in a severe no-nonsense ponytail, she exuded an almost intimidating aura of control. A diamond watch glinted at her wrist as she adjusted the cuff of her jacket. She was the renowned, imperious, and impeccably dressed CEO of Oceania Yachts, a global luxury yacht manufacturing firm, and the vessel lying crippled in the bay was her company's flagship, recently sold to a notoriously demanding tech billionaire. Its failure was not just a public humiliation. It was a catastrophic financial disaster that threatened to unravel years of meticulous brand building. Serafina surveyed the scene with an expression of thinly veiled disgust. Her gaze swept over the struggling local dock workers, the bewildered Coast Guard officials, and the handful of local engineers scratching their heads. She dismissed them with a flick of her wrist, a dismissive wave of her hand. Her voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the morning air, carrying easily over the muted sounds of the bay. Incompetence, she declared, her tone laced with biting contempt. Every single one of them. A flock of geese trying to diagnose a supercomputer. She was oblivious to their quiet professionalism, their genuine efforts, their years of hard-won experience. She simply saw their failure, and in it a reflection of their supposed inferiority. She hadn't come unprepared. She had already flown in 30 of the world's top marine engineers, flown at exorbitant cost from every corner of the globe. From Tokyo to Zurich, from Silicon Valley to the shipyards of Hamburg. They had swarmed over the Siren for days, armed with the latest diagnostic equipment, their faces growing increasingly grim, their pronouncements increasingly vague. And yet they too had failed to diagnose the core issue, only adding to Serafina's profound frustration, her public embarrassment, and the mounting pressure from her company's board. "They've given me nothing but theories and astronomical bills," she fumed to her equally impeccably dressed executive assistant, her voice carrying over the lapping waves intended for anyone within earshot. Her gaze, sharp and restless, swept over the gathered onlookers, resting briefly on Ethan. He was standing a little apart from the crowd, his work shirt smudged with sawdust, his gaze fixed on the Siren. He wasn't gawking like the others. He was observing with an intense, almost analytical focus, a small, worn notebook clutched in his hand, his pencil moving with rapid, almost imperceptible strokes. He was sketching not the entire yacht, but specific angles, subtle details of its hull, the peculiar list. Serafina, seeing his quiet focus, misinterpreted it entirely. To her, this dusty craftsman in his worn clothes was either an idle curiosity seeker, or worse, a rural simpleton with an overinflated sense of his own understanding. She saw only the contrast between his humble appearance and the monumental problem before her. Her frustration, boiling over from days of fruitless expert consultations, needed an outlet. Her condescending arrogance took over, She strode purposefully towards him, her designer heels clicking sharply on the uneven asphalt, a sound of judgment against the backdrop of the struggling port. She stopped a few feet from him, her shadow falling over his notebook. Ethan looked up, his expression unreadable, his eyes betraying nothing of the complex calculations already whirring in his mind. "Well?" Serafina's voice was crisp, laced with thinly veiled contempt. "If you're so smart staring at it like that, sketching away, perhaps you've solved it. 30 of the world's most renowned engineers, the finest minds my company could buy, have failed. Let's see what a local craftsman can do." Her words were not a genuine request for help, but a dismissive taunt, intended to be a public humiliation, a way to vent her frustration and reassert her intellectual superiority over the local yokels. Her lips curled into a faint, disdainful sneer. Or perhaps she added, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "You're just drawing pretty pictures of boats you'll never afford." Ethan felt a profound weariness settle over him, a familiar pull to retreat. He saw her contempt, her arrogance, the chasm between their worlds. His first, most potent instinct was to simply nod, mumble an apology, and disappear back into the anonymity of his workshop, back to the safe, predictable rhythm of sawdust and blueprints. He wanted nothing to do with her world, its scrutiny, its expectations, its baffling complexities that seemed to breed nothing but trouble. His quiet life, his daughter's safety, his hard-won peace were paramount. He had long since buried the brilliance that once defined him, bricked it up behind layers of self-imposed obscurity. But as her words hung in the salty air, a different kind of spark ignited deep within him. Not pride, not ego, but an undeniable, almost primal intellectual curiosity. The yacht. The siren wasn't just a rich woman's toy. It was an impossible puzzle, a defiance of logic, a mechanical conundrum that had stumped the best minds on the planet. He had been quietly observing it for a while, even sketching, and in his mind's eye, as Serafina spoke, he began to see it. Not just the physical flaws, but the intricate, almost elegant flaws in its seemingly perfect design. He saw subtle deviations, points of stress. No scan could detect interdependencies between systems that only revealed themselves under specific complex load pressures. Problems that 30 engineers, blinded by their advanced diagnostics and conventional thinking, had missed entirely. The challenge, though, meant as an insult, had inadvertently awakened a dormant part of his genius, a profound, irresistible desire to solve an impossible puzzle. It was a craving for understanding, for mastery over the chaotic unknown. He knew this meant stepping into the harsh spotlight he had so carefully avoided, into a world he had fled with a deliberate, almost desperate urgency. But the allure of the problem, the sheer audacity of it, coupled with a subtle, unarticulated hope. A hope that solving such a monumental problem might lead to a better, more secure life for Lily, a life free from the constant anxiety of scraping by, pulled him forward away from the shadows he had so carefully cultivated. He took a deep breath, the scent of salt and rain filling his lungs. He met Serafina's imperious gaze, his own eyes calm, steady, and unexpectedly deep. The decision was already made, cemented in the quiet resolve that had always defined him. He closed his notebook, securing the sketches that held the seeds of his solution. "I'll take a look." Ethan said, his voice quiet, but firm, entirely devoid of the deference Serafina expected. There was no boast, no grand pronouncement. Just a simple statement of intent, brimming with an understated confidence that baffled and unnerved Serafina. He turned and began to walk towards the gangway leading to the siren, his silhouette stark against the morning light. The unspoken implication hung in the air, a challenge in itself. He will try. And with that single understated acceptance, his quiet, anonymous existence was irrevocably shattered. The gears of his hidden past had begun to turn once more. Serafina Dubois watched Ethan Thorne walk towards the siren with a mixture of bemusement and irritation. His quiet confidence, devoid of either the fawning deference she expected or the bluster she usually encountered from less capable men, was strangely unsettling. Just a local eccentric, she told herself, a distraction from the real problems. Still, a public challenge demanded a public spectacle, however brief. She instructed her executive assistant to grant him full access, but with a caveat. "Assign Liam to him," she commanded, her voice crisp. Liam was a junior technician fresh out of a prestigious engineering program, bright but easily swayed by authority. Tell him to log every single move Mr. Thorne makes, every tool he touches, every failed attempt. I want a full report by lunch. This charade won't last long, and I want documentation of his incompetence." Her private thoughts, however, were less assured. A tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of doubt stirred within her. The quiet intensity in Ethan's eyes had been disconcerting. She dismissed it as fatigue. Liam, a young man burdened by student debt and an eager desire to impress, approached Ethan with a polite but clearly skeptical air. "Mr. Thorne, I'm Liam. Ms. Dubois has instructed me to assist you and document your progress." His gaze flickered to Ethan's worn work clothes, then to the vast complex machinery of the yacht, a silent judgment of the stark contrast. Ethan simply nodded his eyes, already assessing the siren with an almost clinical detachment. He didn't rush. He didn't immediately reach for complex diagnostic equipment, much to Liam's surprise. Instead, he moved through the yacht's cavernous engine room and labyrinthine control systems with a methodical grace, his hands gently touching components, his head tilted, as if listening to an inaudible symphony. He seemed to bypass the superficial and dive straight into the underlying harmonics of the vessel. He'd press his ear against a bulkhead, his fingers tracing a cold pipe, then move on a quiet intensity radiating from him. Liam, diligently following with a tablet in hand, struggled to keep up. "Shouldn't we run a full systems diagnostic first, sir?" He ventured, accustomed to the protocol of the 30 failed engineers. Ethan merely hummed, his gaze fixed on a complex array of wiring. "Diagnostics tell you what's broken, Liam. I'm trying to understand why." His questions were seemingly simple, yet profoundly insightful. What's the precise tensile strength of this particular alloy in sub-zero temperatures? How long has this particular auxiliary pump been running under sustained high pressure? Was there any unusual electromagnetic activity reported in the bay before the storm? Liam, despite his advanced training, often found himself stumped, having to consult manuals or call senior engineers for answers. These queries baffled Liam, who expected a craftsman to be poking at rusty bolts, not delving into material science and environmental anomalies. They annoyed Serafina, who observed via internal cameras, seeing what she perceived as time-wasting, irrelevant inquiries. Her private thoughts were a storm of condescending disdain. "He's trying to sound important," she thought, trying to confuse Liam with pseudoscience. A charlatan, precisely as I suspected. Ethan, meanwhile, pulled out his worn notebook. Instead of troubleshooting charts, he sketched. Intricate diagrams flowed from his pencil cross-sections of the hull, detailed schematics of hydraulic systems, the subtle curves of the yacht's unique keel. He seemed to be tracing invisible lines of force mapping unseen stresses. He didn't just see the yacht. He seemed to feel its very structural pulse. He finally stopped in the yacht's deepest bilge, a damp, echoing space filled with the metallic tang of salt water and engine oil. He pointed to a section of a massive load-bearing strut, seemingly solid and unremarkable. "There," he said quietly, his voice echoing in the confined space. Liam squinted, saw nothing but pristine metal. A hairline fracture, Ethan clarified, tracing an invisible line with his finger. Not visible to the naked eye, not detectable by ultrasonic scans under static conditions. Liam frowned. "But how we ran every test. Everything came back clear. Because it only manifests under specific complex load pressures," Ethan explained, his voice patient, almost professorial. The combination of the storm's unique wave patterns, the yacht's specific RPM, and perhaps a subtle inherent resonance frequency in the material itself, it causes an infinitesimal flex, a ripple through the structure that subtly disrupts sensitive sensor arrays further up the line, creating intermittent cascading system failures. Like a tiny, almost undetectable tremor, causing a massive building to momentarily lose power. He didn't boast, didn't grandstand. He simply stated his observations and his theory, presenting it as a quiet certainty, a self-evident truth that had eluded 30 experts. Liam, initially dismissive, became increasingly fascinated, then utterly awestruck. He stood there, tablet forgotten, listening intently, as Ethan, with startling clarity, explained the complex mechanics behind his theory. He saw the precision in Ethan's diagnostic methods, the depth of his understanding that surpassed even the renowned engineers who had failed. Liam, unlike his superiors, was receptive to empirical evidence, and Ethan's guesses were yielding logical, undeniable conclusions. Liam started making detailed notes, not of failures, but of Ethan's brilliant insights, the intricate diagrams he was sketching, the unconventional but profoundly accurate questions he was asking. The young technician began to realize he was witnessing something truly extraordinary, a genius unburdened by conventional thinking. Serafina, observing via surveillance feeds, was initially dismissive. Her private thoughts swirled with condescending disdain. He's making it up. A ridiculous theory about invisible fractures. He's trying to impress Liam, spin some elaborate tale. She saw him as a rural simpleton trying to impress, weaving a narrative around vague observations. She reviewed the past engineers' reports, the millions spent on high-tech scans. Impossible, she thought they would have found it. She ordered Liam to double-check Ethan's theory, expecting him to return with a debunking. However, as Liam's subsequent, more focused scans and readings, guided by Ethan's precise instructions, began to yield data that, while still subtle, logically explained the impossible readings her own engineers had collected but couldn't interpret, a flicker of uneasy recognition began to prick at her arrogance. The anomalous sensor spikes, the intermittent power fluctuations, the unexplained micro-vibrations. Suddenly, they made terrifying sense through the lens of Ethan's hairline fracture theory. She refused to admit it even to herself. Her pride, her corporate identity, was too deeply intertwined with the infallibility of her company's engineering. To admit this local craftsman was right meant admitting her entire elite team, and by extension she herself had been catastrophically wrong. Simultaneously, far from the docks, Julian Croft, the CEO from the previous story who had been disgraced and imprisoned for corporate sabotage, remained a shadowy puppet master pulling strings from behind bars. His network of loyal, compromised individuals on the outside was diminished, but still active. He, too, was a specialist in marine technology and the failure of the Siren, a vessel he had covertly, subtly sabotaged months ago, targeting not its structural integrity, but an obscure flaw in its complex sensor arrays and a vulnerability in its remote control backup systems, all designed to embarrass Eleanor Vance's partner company, which supplied some of the yacht's internal systems, was a topic of great interest to him. His initial sabotage had been designed to cause intermittent, inexplicable malfunctions, not outright destruction, purely for corporate embarrassment. He used his incarcerated network to monitor news and industry chatter. When he heard whispers of a local craftsman potentially solving the yacht's impossible problem, and especially when his informants identified the name Ethan Thorne, a cold, calculating chill ran down his spine. The name rang a faint but distinct bell from old, obscure intelligence files concerning a brilliant, unconventional engineer who had vanished years ago from the high-tech defense sector, a man known for his unorthodox but devastatingly effective problem-solving. Croft, remembering Eleanor Vance's unexpected hero from his own downfall, immediately triggered. He recognized the pattern, the quiet brilliance that defied conventional logic. He ordered his remaining loyal outside network to discreetly investigate Ethan Thorne, not for corporate espionage this time, but out of a deeper, more personal and potentially vengeful curiosity. "Find out everything about this Thorne," he rasped into a smuggled burner phone, his voice laced with venom. "Where he came from, why he's hiding. He's too clever by half. He might be a connection to Vance, or worse, someone who understands my methods." Croft, seeing Ethan not just as a skilled repairman, but potentially as the very individual who helped Eleanor expose him in the past, or at least someone with a similar dangerous level of ingenuity, began to weave a new subtle web of sabotage and misinformation around Ethan. His agents began to spread carefully crafted rumors through the local community, whispers designed to undermine Ethan's credibility. "He's a charlatan," they murmured to dock workers. "He'll take your money and disappear." "He's dangerous, unstable," seen him yelling at shadows, they whispered to local gossips. "He's a con artist just waiting to swindle the rich CEO," they told struggling fishermen. These were insidious, untraceable slanders designed to ensure Ethan's eventual downfall, to paint him as unreliable a threat to his livelihood and even to his custody of Lily. Croft also began to plot ways to use Ethan's talent for his own ends, seeing him as a valuable asset to acquire or neutralize if the opportunity arose. He envisioned forcing Ethan to work for him to design his next generation of undetectable sabotage tools, or failing that, to ensure he was neutralized as a threat. The game for Julian Croft was always about power and control, and Ethan Thorne, the quiet craftsman, had just unwittingly become the newest, most intriguing piece on his board. The veil of obscurity Ethan had so carefully constructed was about to be ripped away. Ethan's diagnosis of the Siren's hairline fracture, brilliantly precise and undeniably logical, should have been met with immediate action. Instead, it was met with a wall of bureaucratic inertia and corporate pride. Serafina Dubois, despite the undeniable evidence that Liam, now a secret ally, discreetly provided, refused to publicly acknowledge the fault. The idea that her company's flagship yacht, designed by their top engineers, had such a fundamental flaw exposed by a local craftsman with no formal credentials was an anathema. It would be a catastrophic blow to Oceania Yacht's reputation, a concession she was not prepared to make, not yet. The yacht, despite its crippling flaw, had to be fully operational. A crucial high-profile maiden voyage and demonstration for a powerful skeptical investor consortium was scheduled in just 1 week. These investors, representing billions in potential future contracts, were already wavering, scrutinizing rumors of the yacht's unfixable status. Failure to launch on schedule, or any visible sign of further malfunction, meant colossal financial losses for Oceania Yachts and for Serafina personal ruin, a public downfall she had ruthlessly avoided her entire career. The metaphorical arena for Ethan's ultimate test became the entire docking facility. It transformed into a public stage where his unconventional methods were scrutinized, his every move watched, and his lack of pedigree openly mocked by Serafina's corporate loyalists. He was given only minimal resources, a fraction of what he truly needed, and a skeleton crew of disgruntled, skeptical company men ordered to assist him, but clearly instructed to observe his every failure. The pressure was immense, the air thick with doubt and resentment. Simultaneously, the subtle campaign of slander orchestrated by Julian Croft's lingering network began to intensify its insidious tendrils, reaching deeper into Ethan's quiet life. Whispers expertly planted began to spread through the town and dockyards like a virulent contagion. "Ethan Thorne is a charlatan, a danger unstable," they murmured. "He's just trying to exploit the rich woman's misfortune for his own gain." The rumors threatened to undermine his hard-won reputation as an honest craftsman, his very livelihood. His workshop, once a sanctuary, now felt exposed, vulnerable to the insidious whispers. Worst of all, these anonymous tips, crafted with cruel precision by Croft's agents, found their way to social services. They began to discreetly question his unstable living and work situation. A seemingly polite but probing phone call, a casual visit from a caseworker asking about Lily's welfare, her education, the cleanliness of the workshop. Innocent on the surface, but deeply alarming to Ethan. The implicit threat of losing Lily, the one constant, the one pure joy in his life, hung heavy in the air. Ethan was caught between proving his technical genius on a world stage and protecting his daughter from a slanderous campaign that threatened to tear their small family apart. The stakes were no longer just about a yacht. They were about Lily's future, his very right to be a father. Ethan found himself increasingly isolated. Serafina's engineers and company men viewed him with open disdain and simmering resentment. He was an outsider, a threat to their own inflated reputations, especially after he had so easily pointed out their collective oversight regarding the hairline fracture. They actively sabotaged his efforts in petty, infuriating ways. Tools would go missing. Vital repair parts would be misplaced. His intricate notes on the yacht's systems would mysteriously vanish, forcing him to reconstruct them from memory. They deliberately slowed down their assistance, providing incorrect readings or delaying crucial information, making his already impossible task even harder. They were the subtle antagonists, their actions fueled by a corrosive mix of pride and fear. Liam, the junior technician, remained Ethan's only true ally within the company. He had seen Ethan's brilliance firsthand, had witnessed his quiet integrity. Liam tried to help where he could, secretly providing correct data, warning Ethan of impending bureaucratic obstacles, even sneaking him better tools when no one was looking. But Liam was low on the corporate ladder, easily dismissed, and his support, though invaluable, was largely symbolic. He couldn't provide the substantial overt support Ethan desperately needed. Lily, sensing her father's escalating stress, tried to help in small ways. She'd bring him warm coffee, draw him pictures of magnificent repaired yachts, or simply sit quietly beside him, her presence a silent comfort. But Ethan, with a practiced gentleness, shielded her from the true extent of the danger. He didn't want her to worry, didn't want her innocent world tainted by the vicious whispers or the looming threat from social services. This made him feel even more alone in his fight, bearing the full weight of the burden on his own shoulders. He faced the crushing public scrutiny, the corporate sabotage, and the subtle, insidious threats to his family, all while knowing that a single misstep, a solitary error, could cost him everything. The looming deadline of the maiden voyage created an unbearable temporal pressure. Every minute lost to sabotage or bureaucratic obstruction amplified the tension to a near breaking point. Ethan worked around the clock, fueled by sheer will, a few hours of fitful sleep on a cot in the workshop, and copious amounts of black coffee. His genius, once a source of quiet satisfaction, was now a tool of desperate survival. He was not only fixing an unfixable problem, but also racing against an invisible clock to clear his name and secure Lily's future before the combined forces of corporate arrogance and vengeful manipulation crushed him. Adding another insidious layer of complexity, a mysterious, almost imperceptible glitch began to plague the yacht's restored systems. After Ethan had painstakingly located and temporarily shored up the hairline fracture stabilizing the yacht's core systems, the diagnostics would occasionally flash random, inexplicable errors. The navigation system would briefly lag, a secondary engine would inexplicably sputter for a few seconds, or a minor sensor array would flicker offline before self-correcting. Ethan couldn't quite pinpoint its source. It wasn't the fracture. This was something else, something external, erratic, and deeply unsettling. He suspected foul play, a subtle, ongoing sabotage designed to ensure his ultimate failure, to make the yacht appear fundamentally flawed, even if he fixed its most obvious issue. This was Julian Croft's final desperate attempt to ensure Ethan's downfall, a ghost in the machine designed to haunt his success. Ethan's days blurred into a relentless cycle of diagnosis, repair, and counter-sabotage. He began to sleep even less, his eyes constantly scanning his mind, running simulations of every possible malfunction. He had to anticipate not just the yacht's inherent flaws, but the deliberate interference from both inside and outside the company. The constant threat to Lily, the subtle questioning from social services gnawed at him, fueling a primal protective fury. He had to succeed. For Lily, for his quiet life, for the peace he had so desperately sought. The maiden voyage wasn't just a test of a yacht. It was a crucible for Ethan Thorne, a battle for his very existence. He was hanging by a single hair, and the snap would either send him plummeting into ruin or propel him towards an unimaginable vindication. The morning of the maiden voyage dawned with an unnerving, almost theatrical calm. The tumultuous storms had passed, leaving behind a sky of an almost painful, pristine blue. The Siren. A gleaming white behemoth of luxury sat at the dockside, polished to a blinding sheen, its futuristic lines reflecting the sun like a beacon. For the assembled crowd, it was a marvel of engineering. For Ethan, it was a powder keg, its carefully concealed flaws, and the insidious threat of unseen sabotage lurking beneath its perfect exterior. A throng of skeptical investors dressed in impeccably tailored suits and radiating an air of detached judgment mingled with high-ranking corporate executives from Oceania Yachts and a ravenous pack of local and international media. Microphones bristled, cameras flashed their lenses, hungry for either triumph or disaster. Serafina Dubois, though outwardly composed and regal in a sharp navy suit, was a bundle of raw nerves. Every practiced smile, every confident gesture cost her immense effort. This was her moment of truth, the culmination of years of relentless ambition hanging precariously on the performance of this vessel, and the quiet man who stood beside it. Far away in a stark prison cell, Julian Croft, antagonist type A, sat before a flickering contraband tablet. He had managed to arrange for a live video feed to be streamed directly to his cell, an illicit but essential luxury. His eyes, cold and calculating, watched the scene at the docks, eager to witness Ethan's public failure and revel in Serafina's humiliation. He had engineered a subtle, insidious sabotage, a final ghost-in-the-machine glitch that no conventional engineer would ever find. He knew it was there, waiting to strike at the most opportune moment. Liam, the junior technician who had become Ethan's quiet confidant, stood near the gangway, his face a mask of hope and anxiety. He had secretly helped Ethan, providing accurate schematics, running diagnostics that went ignored by his superiors, and subtly countering the petty sabotage from his envious colleagues. His career, his future, was now irrevocably tied to Ethan's success. Lily, dressed in her best, a simple but pretty sundress Ethan had carefully chosen, stood nervously by her father, her small hand clutching the worn ear of her teddy bear, a tiny figure of vulnerable hope amidst the glittering opulence. The atmosphere was electric, charged with expectation, doubt, and an undercurrent of barely suppressed tension. A hush fell as Serafina, with a forced smile, approached the gangway. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice rang out practiced and poised. "It is my distinct pleasure to present to you the Siren, a testament to Oceania Yacht's unparalleled innovation and engineering prowess. We invite you now to witness her maiden voyage." She gestured grandly towards the yacht. As the Siren slowly, majestically began to pull away from the dock, the powerful thrusters humming to life, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. For a few glorious moments it seemed Ethan's work had held. Then the almost imperceptible glitch that Ethan couldn't quite diagnose began to manifest. It was insidious, subtle, a phantom in the complex machinery. On the main control panel, a light flickered, then stabilized. The yacht's advanced navigation system, designed to guide it with pinpoint precision, began to lag, its trajectory indicators briefly wavering. Then a shudder ran through the deck. The primary engine sputtered, coughed, and for a terrifying second seemed to lose power before catching again with a jarring jolt. The vessel, instead of maintaining its steady course, began to veer subtly, dangerously towards a notorious shallow sandbar that lay a few hundred yards off the main channel, known for tearing the hulls of even smaller vessels. Panic, a cold, insidious dread, began to spread through the passengers. Whispers turned to shouts. Serafina's chief engineer, a portly man named Harrison, his face already pale, darted to the main console, his fingers fumbling over controls. "What's happening? It's losing alignment. The GPS is erratic." In a desperate, misguided attempt to regain control, he slammed his hand down on a large red button labeled Emergency Power Shutdown. The immediate effect was catastrophic. The yacht's engines died completely, the hum replaced by an ominous silence. All lights, all systems went dark. The Siren became a dead weight, a colossal, unresponsive shell drifting helplessly. The wind, picking up speed, began to push the vessel directly towards the treacherous rocks that jutted out near the sandbar, jagged teeth, ready to rip open the yacht's sleek hull. It was the ultimate failure, a truly breathless moment where everything seemed lost. The investors' faces contorted in horror. The media began to scramble their cameras, capturing the impending disaster. Julian Croft, watching from his cell, allowed a slow, triumphant smile to spread across his face. Fool. He never stood a chance. Ethan, his face, grim eyes narrowed, reacted with the instinct of a seasoned combatant. He hadn't been standing idly by. From the moment the first system flickered, he knew. He realized the glitch wasn't an inherent flaw. It was an external, deliberate sabotage. The peculiar flicker, the specific timing, the nature of the interference. He recognized the signature. It was a precise, low-frequency electromagnetic pulse, a unique pattern he had encountered years ago, a signature of the kind of clandestine, untraceable interference he had once been tasked with either designing or defending against. He knew with chilling certainty it was Croft. "Harrison, what have you done?" Serafina shrieked, her composure shattering, her face paling to an ashen white. "It's dead, completely dead," Harrison stammered, frantically hitting unresponsive buttons. Ethan didn't waste a second on words. With rapid, precise movements almost too quick for the eye to follow, he took control. He didn't bother with the main console, which was now useless. Instead, his hand dove into his worn leather toolbox, retrieving a small, cylindrical device. It was discreet, custom-built, a compact, jury-rigged EMP countermeasure he had secretly designed and integrated into the Siren's system during his late-night repairs, anticipating exactly this kind of insidious sabotage. He had done it without Serafina's knowledge, a quiet act of foresight born from his shadowed past. He quickly connected the device to a hidden port he had installed near an auxiliary power conduit. A soft hum emanated from the cylinder, and the yacht's systems flickered back to life, not all at once, but in stages, a slow, steadying pulse. Lights returned, diagnostic screens glowed, and the thrum of the emergency thrusters, though weak, began to vibrate through the deck. But the sandbar was rapidly approaching, closer than ever. The main navigation was still crippled, overloaded by the EMP. There was no time to run full diagnostics, no time to restart the main engines. Ethan ignored the panicked shouts, the frantic attempts of other engineers to take over. He moved to a smaller manual steering console tucked away for emergency use. He overrode the crippled navigation system, entirely relying on pure instinctual knowledge of the currents, the wind, and his deep understanding of the Siren's capabilities. It was a ballet of precise, fluid movements. His hands danced over the manual steering wheel, making subtle, almost imperceptible adjustments. His eyes, calm and focused, darted between the approaching sandbar, the shifting currents on the water, and the faint responsive flicker of the emergency thrusters. He didn't fight the yacht. He became one with it, coaxing it, guiding its massive bulk with surgical precision. Inch by agonizing inch, the yacht responded. It veered ever so slightly away from the jagged rocks, its bow slowly, imperceptibly turning away from the imminent danger. A collective, shuddering sigh of relief swept across the deck. As the yacht's bow cleared the final rock by mere feet, the spray of the waves on the sandbar creating a dramatic, foamy backdrop. Then, with a final, expertly timed burst of emergency thrust, Ethan brought the massive vessel to a safe, controlled stop just shy of the dangerous rocks floating calmly in the deeper channel. The air was thick with the scent of salt and ozone, but the terror had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming wave of relief. Then stunned silence. The investors, the executives, the media, all stood utterly motionless, their mouths agape. Serafina, her face initially pale with terror, then a mask of profound shock, watched Ethan. She saw the brilliance in his eyes, the raw, untamed talent in his precise movements, the audacious courage that had saved them all. Her arrogant disdain melted away, replaced by profound awe, and a dawning, humbling realization of her colossal misjudgment. He wasn't just a craftsman. He was a master. He was a genius. She turned to her chief engineer, Harrison, who now stood utterly dumbfounded, staring at the perfectly still yacht. Her voice, though still trembling slightly, was firm, clear, and projected for everyone to hear. 30 engineers failed. He solved it. He saved us. She then, in a public humbling display that shocked her own staff, stepped forward directly to the media, her gaze sweeping over the flashing cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice gaining strength, "Mr. Ethan Thorne is not just a craftsman. He is a genius. He exposed a fundamental flaw we missed, a flaw that cost us millions. And then when a truly insidious sabotage almost brought us down, he saved this vessel, and he saved my company." This maiden voyage, she declared, her eyes now fixed on Ethan with an expression of profound respect, is a testament to his brilliance and his courage. Her words were a complete public vindication for Ethan, resounding across the docks. The media, initially skeptical and looking for a scandal, now clamored for his story, their questions shifting from disaster to heroics. Julian Croft, watching from his prison cell, saw his final, most elaborate act of vengeance spectacularly backfire. His face, illuminated by the tablet's glow, contorted into a snarl of impotent rage. His last vestiges of power utterly shattered, replaced by bitter, suffocating defeat. Ethan Thorne, the quiet single dad, had not only fixed the unfixable, but had risen unexpectedly as the unforeseen architect of his own and Serafina's redemption. The aftermath of the Siren's near disaster and Ethan Thorne's breathtaking save sent shockwaves far beyond the quiet coastal town. The story, picked up by every major news outlet, wasn't just about a yacht. It was about the triumph of true genius over corporate arrogance and the exposure of a shadowy, vengeful hand. Julian Croft, antagonist type A, confined to his prison cell, received the news of Ethan's success with a chilling, impotent rage. His last, most elaborate attempt at vengeance had spectacularly backfired, not only failing to humiliate Serafina, but inadvertently shining a spotlight on the very man he sought to discredit. The detailed reports from the yacht's recovered black box, combined with Ethan's testimony and Liam's corroborated internal logs, provided undeniable evidence. The EMP pulse, subtly designed to cripple the yacht without direct damage, bore Croft's unique technological signature, a pattern of sabotage he had perfected over years of corporate espionage. Furthermore, Serafina's now vigilant security teams, spurred by her renewed trust in Ethan's instincts, swiftly traced the signals back to Croft's remaining loyalists, who were quickly rounded up. The discovery of Croft's continued machinations from behind bars led to additional severe charges: conspiracy to commit economic sabotage, obstruction of justice, and manipulating a public event for personal gain. His existing network, already weakened, was entirely dismantled. Croft faced a barrage of new legal battles he could not win. His power, wealth, and what remained of his tarnished reputation were utterly destroyed. He was stripped of all privileges. His last remaining contacts cut off, his future sealed in solitary confinement. A just and comprehensive downfall that left him isolated and utterly powerless. A stark, fitting consequence for his insatiable greed and the chaos he had wrought. He was truly erased from the world he once dominated. Meanwhile, a surprising anonymous letter arrived at Ethan's workshop delivered by an unassuming courier. It was from Marcus Kingpin Thorne, the local gang leader from the previous story who had served part of his sentence. The letter, written in a surprisingly neat hand, expressed genuine remorse for his past actions, particularly for his role in unsettling Ethan's neighborhood under Croft's manipulation. He spoke of the rehabilitation programs he was undergoing, the harsh lessons learned in prison, and quietly pleaded for guidance for a chance to contribute positively to the community he had once terrorized. He wanted to reform to build something real. Ethan, remembering his own redemption, saw a flicker of hope in Kingpin's words, a potential for restorative justice beyond mere incarceration. Sergeant Evans, the perceptive officer from the previous story who had been present at the docks and witnessed Ethan's astonishing actions firsthand, approached Ethan with genuine, profound respect. Gone was the initial skepticism, replaced by a deep admiration. He didn't just clear Ethan's name publicly, he actively became his advocate. He used his platform to champion Ethan's character, dispelling the lingering rumors about his instability or charlatanism, vouching for his integrity to the local media and community leaders. Sergeant Evans also became a valuable public ally in the broader effort to revitalize the community. Inspired by Ethan and Eleanor's vision, he immediately implemented new, more community-focused policing initiatives, assigning a dedicated team to the area, promising to be a visible, responsive, and trustworthy presence, actively working to rebuild the broken trust between law enforcement and the residents. The dust settled and the sounds of legal battles and public outcry faded, replaced by the quiet hum of an extraordinary opportunity. Serafina Dubois' antagonist Type B, thoroughly humbled and profoundly impressed by Ethan's genius, didn't just offer him a reward. She offered him a partnership that would redefine her company and his life. She invited him to Oceana Yachts' sleek corporate headquarters, a world away from his sawdust-scented workshop. There, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the city skyline, she laid out her proposal. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice devoid of its former arrogance, "what you possess is not just skill, but visionary genius. It's a quality that our traditional methods, our conventional thinking, utterly failed to recognize." She acknowledged her past mistakes, her blindness to talent outside her elite circles, her initial contempt. "I was wrong, profoundly wrong, and I apologize." Then came the offer, a new cutting-edge division within Oceana Yachts, one focused entirely on innovative engineering solutions, advanced maritime design, and pioneering sustainable technologies. This division, she proposed, would be led by Ethan. "This isn't just a job, Mr. Thorne," she stressed, her eyes earnest. "It's a platform for your brilliance, a chance to fully explore your most ambitious ideas without financial constraints or bureaucratic red tape. You will have state-of-the-art resources, a dedicated team, including Liam if you choose, and the authority to implement your vision." This new role provided him with not just immense financial stability, but also intellectual fulfillment, a respected place in a world he had once deliberately abandoned. It was a chance to bring his extraordinary ideas to life, to build things that truly mattered. Ethan, initially reserved, found himself undeniably drawn to the intellectual challenge, the sheer scope of the opportunity. It was a chance to use his gifts not just for survival, but for creation on a grand scale. He accepted, a quiet sense of purpose settling deep within him. Crucially, the long hours spent working together, first under duress, then in collaboration, began to spark a deeper, more personal connection between Ethan and Serafina. Their professional admiration, forged in the crucible of shared danger and mutual respect, blossomed into a quiet, tentative romance. Their conversations stretched late into the evenings, discussing complex engineering problems, one moment, then shifting to lighter, more personal anecdotes the next. Serafina, stripped of her corporate armor, revealed a more vulnerable, compassionate side. She spoke of the pressures of her position, the loneliness of constant competition. Ethan, in turn, found himself sharing fragments of his past, something he hadn't done with anyone in years. Weeks later, amidst the hum of the newly established R&D lab, a bright, spacious facility filled with gleaming prototypes and buzzing 3D printers, Ethan and Serafina shared a quiet moment, a rare pause in their demanding schedules. They were poring over blueprints for a new environmentally friendly propulsion system, one of Ethan's groundbreaking designs. It's funny, isn't it? Serafina murmured, leaning back in her chair, a soft smile playing on her lips. Our first meeting. You covered in sawdust me demanding you fix my boat like some medieval lord. I truly thought you were some kind of local curiosity. She shook her head, a genuine laugh escaping her. I thought I knew everything about talent, about what success looked like. But you showed me how little I truly understood about genuine ingenuity and about courage that doesn't need a spotlight. Ethan in turn chuckled softly, and I saw a formidable CEO utterly out of her element trying to bluff her way through a problem she couldn't control. I just wanted to disappear back into my wood chips. He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at her. But your challenge, despite its initial contempt, inadvertently forced me to confront my own buried potential, pulled me out of my self-imposed exile. It reminded me of a purpose I'd tried to forget. He hesitated, then took a breath. My past. The reason I left engineering behind. It was burnout mostly. And a particularly brutal incident on a military project. Too much pressure, too many lives on the line. I made a mistake, a small miscalculation that led to devastating consequences. I couldn't bear to face it, couldn't bear the thought of that kind of responsibility again. I just wanted to build things I could touch, control, where the only consequence was a crooked table leg. He gestured to the faded gear and compass tattoo on his wrist. This was from a clandestine unit, a humanitarian task force that worked in disaster zones. I used to design improvised solutions for impossible problems. But after that one failure, I just ran. Serafina listened, her expression compassionate, her hand gently covering his on the table. You ran to protect Lily, she said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. You built a safe world for her. And now you're building a safe future for countless others by using those very same skills. This shared vulnerability deepened their connections, sealing their bond, not just as colleagues, but as partners. Their conversations flowed easily, no longer strained by professional boundaries, a testament to a connection deeper than corporate titles or social strata. Ethan still designed custom furniture in his old workshop, but now it was for the sheer joy of creation, not out of financial necessity. His mind, no longer burdened by the pressure of survival, was free to craft beauty and innovation in equal measure. He often brought Lily to the R&D lab, explaining complex concepts in simple terms, fostering her burgeoning interest in design and technology. The romance between him and Serafina continued to quietly flourish, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and a deep, unexpected love. The quiet dignity of a single father had found its extraordinary counterpart, and together they were poised to build something truly remarkable, not just for themselves, but for the world. 5 years later. The coastal town, once a sleepy collection of fishing docks and struggling workshops, had transformed. It pulsed with a vibrant, undeniable energy, a living testament to transformation, a thriving ecosystem of innovation and community. The old ramshackle fishing gear shed that once housed Ethan's workshop now stood as the gleaming glass-fronted entrance to the Thorn du Bois Innovation Hub, a testament to collaborative vision. The air, once heavy with the scent of stagnant water and unspoken struggles, now carried the cheerful cacophony of progress, the whir of advanced machinery, the laughter of children, and the distant rhythmic clang of a thriving shipyard. Maya, now 15, was a brilliant and confident young woman. The community school, a state-of-the-art facility built on what was once a derelict lot, hummed with activity. Maya walked to school each morning with a gaggle of friends, her laughter bright and unburdened, her mind alight with new discoveries in advanced robotics and sustainable design. She was a confident, curious teenager, untouched by the shadows that had once threatened their peace, a future brimming with possibilities stretching out before her. She often interned at the Innovation Hub, her own burgeoning interest in engineering sparked by her father and Serafina, her insights already surprising the seasoned professionals. Ethan Maxwell was no longer just a single dad struggling to make ends meet. He was a respected figure, a pillar of his revitalized community, and an invaluable asset to Vance Holdings. His office, a spacious, light-filled space within the Thorn du Bois Innovation Hub, was a hub of activity. As the head of Oceana Yacht's new advanced engineering division, he oversaw groundbreaking projects from sustainable propulsion systems to intelligent maritime navigation. His quiet dignity and unwavering strength guided every decision, ensuring that every new development honored the history and spirit of the existing residents. His integrity a powerful counterpoint to the ruthless greed he had once encountered. He was no longer just managing construction. He was building a legacy, one of opportunity, technological advancement, and profound empowerment. His almost illegible tattoo, once a hidden mark of a buried past, was now a visible emblem, a testament to his journey. He often wore short-sleeved shirts in the warmer months, and the tattoo, a discrete geometric symbol of a gear intertwined with a compass, was clearly visible on his forearm. It was the symbol of an elite clandestine humanitarian task force. He had once been a part of a unit dedicated to quiet, high-stakes interventions in global crises. He now openly acknowledged this past, not with bravado, but with a calm acceptance, using his experiences to fuel his present purpose. He often lectured at prestigious universities and international conferences, sharing his unique insights on urban resilience, sustainable engineering, and community empowerment. His unconventional perspective captivating audiences and inspiring a new generation of innovators. He spoke of how the most profound problems often required the most unconventional solutions, and how true resilience came from within a community, not from external forces. Beyond his professional role, Leo had poured his heart into giving back. He established a thriving nonprofit foundation, partially funded by Serafina, through Vance Holdings, called the Unseen Architects. Its mission was simple yet profound: to provide job training and educational opportunities for at-risk youth in underserved communities, focusing on practical skills, ethical innovation, and real-world problem-solving. He mentored young men and women, sharing not just technical skills, but more importantly, imparting lessons in self-reliance, integrity, and the quiet power of making a difference, even when no one was watching. He held workshops in the newly built community center, teaching everything from basic carpentry to advanced drone operation, from sustainable agriculture to conflict resolution. His own experiences served as a powerful testament to the transformative power of a second chance, a life built on purpose. Marcus Thorne, the former kingpin, now out of prison and deeply committed to his own redemption, became one of the Foundation's most dedicated volunteers, working directly with the youth. His own story, a powerful cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. The story culminates on a warm, late-afternoon sunlight bathing the revitalized coastal town in a golden glow. Ethan, Serafina, and Lily stood together on the deck of a newly launched, groundbreaking vessel, the Spirit of Tomorrow. It wasn't just a yacht. It was a fusion of luxury, cutting-edge, sustainable technology and groundbreaking engineering, a project entirely conceptualized and brought to life by Ethan's division. Its hull was made from recycled ultra-lightweight composites, its propulsion system ran on clean hydrogen fuel cells, and its internal systems were fully self-sufficient, a marvel of environmental responsibility and innovative design. As the Spirit of Tomorrow glided smoothly across the calm waters of the bay, sunlight glinting off its sleek, almost futuristic hull, Ethan put an arm around Lily, then interlaced his fingers with Serafina's. He looked at Maya now, a young woman standing tall and confident beside him, then at Serafina, his heart full with a quiet, profound contentment. The once bad neighborhood was now a testament to enduring transformation, a beacon of what could be achieved when unseen heroes stepped forward, when kindness triumphed over greed, and when a single dad unknowingly walked a CEO home, setting in motion a chain of events that rebuilt not just a community, but countless lives. The sun dipped lower, casting long, peaceful shadows over the revitalized streets and the sparkling waters of the bay, a silent, powerful testament to the quiet strength of an unseen architect. The world was still full of challenges, but for Ethan and his family, the future was an open horizon, full of promise, built on foundations of resilience, ingenuity, and love. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path, even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining our journey.